After emergency unemployment benefits in the U.S. expired more than 2 weeks ago, employers and economists alike assumed they'd have an increase in job applications. But Bloomberg reports that many workers haven't returned. As we've discussed on this show, a lot of working class folks aren't willing to return to low-paying jobs. Most restaurants, even here in D.C., decline to offer their workers health insurance, despite low wages and being in close quarters with other employees and patrons. Daycare workers are also quitting their jobs for better paying ones, leading to childcare classrooms closing. Over 10,000 daycare workers quit this summer, which comes as no surprise when the median pay is $12.24 an hour. So Ryan, there's been excellent reporting on how, coming out of COVID, when people were able to get direct payments and assistance, they're now hesitant to go back into the workforce. They feel like they can, demand better paying jobs now. That does happen when there's so many job openings. It gives, workers a bit of ability to advocate for more for themselves. Where do you see this going?
The irony is that we already had data on this because a lot of red states ended the expanded unemployment benefits earlier than blue states did. And so we could then compare the states and see whether or not, immiserating people further actually drove them to take these jobs. And the data came in and it said that no, it did not actually work. But there's just a fundamental belief that it's true. And there is truth to it. If you drive somebody to starvation, they will do anything for money. And they will do anything to not starve. So that's one end of the spectrum. What economists and policymakers are trying to figure out is where on the spectrum they need to go of torture and immiseration to get people to take these jobs back that they don't want. And so they thought that if they ended it nationally, that would help. The eviction moratorium expiring, they thought that would help. In February, they're going to start making people pay unless they pause it. Their student loans again. They hope that will push people further toward the misery that will drive them back into these jobs. So far, it hasn't worked. Workers were discarded just completely callously at the beginning of the pandemic. And now those people who discarded them are so confused and baffled at why they're not rushing back.
So a couple of things, and I think completely valid points. I think the hard thing, what the economy has to determine is what is the amount that we could potentially raise the minimum wage to that would meet the needs of getting people back into the workforce who are hesitant to do it now, who feel like they have the leverage to advocate for more, but that also wouldn't kill jobs, that wouldn't result in there being fewer jobs available to workers to fill. Because I mean, that's ultimately what it's a numbers game that this comes down to. And for, conservatives like myself, I'm open to the discussion of raising the minimum wage, but if in fact it's not going to kill so many jobs that it results in more people in fact being unemployed, most people would take underemployment over no employment at all. But I think part of what we have to consider in this discussion is you had kind of a stacking of benefits that were very necessary during the pandemic. So you had the direct payments, you had unemployment insurance extended, and then of course things like the eviction moratorium where people were getting support and people who weren't able to work or who were laid off during it had a certain level of income. Those benefits are slowly going away, and those who are underemployed or unemployed aren't going to be in a position forever to have this leverage. So I think the discussion that needs to be had is where can we meet in the middle that we can get people back into the workforce. We certainly have to fill these jobs. Companies are suffering, services are suffering, but I think this idea that workers have all of this leverage now that's actually a very small window. They're eventually going to have to get back in the workforce.
Well, that's the hope of these bosses, that they can keep ratcheting up the pain on people so that they have to come back. Meanwhile, there's hundreds of thousands of people knocking at the doors of the country saying that they're looking for a better life, and we're chasing them around the desert on horseback. So there's this bizarre contradiction going on that the country is just unable to grapple with because it needs to express its base cruelty toward toward migrants, while at the same time expressing a base amount of cruelty toward low-wage people as well.
But the problem is say we brought in all of the folks who are at the border wanting to come in and gave them these low-paying jobs, that there would be no economy that exists for these people right now who are unemployed or underemployed in the U.S. who are trying to advocate for more. So I think it has to begin with the domestic policy discussion about what's the wage that's going to get people back in the workforce, or what are the benefits that it has to have. But one thing we also have to consider is the gig economy really thrived during COVID, which is, do you want to do Instacart? Do you want to drive Uber and do a bunch of part-time kind of work? And I think that's ultimately where a lot of these workers are going to go. But as we know, those companies kind of make their models built on the backs of their employees, and doesn't always come with great benefits.
So Vice reports that companies like Amazon are having such a hard time finding workers, they are foregoing drug tests in a bid to retain more workers. According to a Manpower Group survey, 9% of more than 45,000 employers worldwide were eliminating drug tests to attract talent. And this is an example of the way that worker power improves the conditions for workers. So everybody knows that if you're a stockbroker or if you're a white-collar worker, you're not going to be subject to drug tests. If you are experiencing some serious substance abuse issue, then that's something that you're going to be confronted with by bosses in a white-collar profession. In the blue-collar professions, they want you to piss in a cup to prove that you didn't smoke weed a week ago,
or in the White House,
which has nothing to do with whether or not you can work in that job, or
right.
or ridiculously in the White House, but the White House is the real exception to that.
Well, and I would rather see, I've seen, McDonald's and some other, big chain institutions were offering bonuses for people coming on board. I think giving money incentives is a much better way to get workers back into the workplace than waiving things like drug tests. But
marijuana is legal in most of the country now. It's like, get off people's back.
Fair.
Like Taco Bell drug testing people? Are you kidding me?
Fair. But don't you have to, just to push this a little further, don't you have to agree that part of why these workers are not going back into the workforce is because they had enough resources coming in from the federal government?
And the jobs suck. Yeah.
Yeah, because this is what I worry about, is that they do have this window of leverage that they may miss, and they're going to be even more left behind in the economy than they were ahead of it.
What's interesting is that this reveals whose interests the system responds to. So you've had employers complaining that they don't have the money to be able to afford enough help. That they can't hire people without raising wages, and they don't want to raise wages. So the entire political system has activated itself around this problem. At the same time, you have tenants, you have people who are saying we can't afford the cost of housing, the cost of rent. And the system has not organized itself and activated itself around that issue. So both people are complaining that they don't want to spend what they need to spend to obtain what they need. The employers get rescued and bailed out by the entire political system, which is going to do everything it can to take away that leverage from workers that you're talking about, while they're not going to do anything to landlords, except, and in fact, they're going to give them this repeal of the eviction moratorium.
Well, the housing discussion is a very interesting one that we've had here on this show, and just the skyrocketing price of home ownership and inability of many people to even live in this current economy. But with that, more rising after this.